Welcome, everyone. This is Anissa Avon with Turnkey Coaching Solutions. And with me is Jill Chapman with Insperity. Hello, Jill.
Aloha, how are you?
Doing fantastic. In spite of being homebound and dealing with the chaos of this time, I want to thank everyone for being here today. We are excited about having the opportunity to support you. We're excited about talking about managing your newly remote team. Jill actually suggested the pajamas optional, which I think is quite appropriate.
Or pants.
Right, whichever you prefer. It's a very timely opportunity for us to be joining and collaborating. And we're going to get right into it today. So as we proceed, if you have questions, if you had a specific idea around what you wanted to accomplish today or what you'd like to learn today, don't hesitate to reach out, submit that in the chat box. We will get to those questions. I also want to let everyone know that we are still bringing in experts from around the world to talk about leading in a crisis. Our specific goal is to provide actionable business and HR strategies for navigating this crisis, this chaos, and this change. And I am very proud of the experts that have raised their hand and said, where can I help? Where can I share? And then on top of that, we have just a ton of free offers and bonuses and exclusive offers for you guys. In fact, one I want to mention right out of the gate, even before we begin, has been very generous from Insperity. They're actually offering for attendees of our virtual summit here a free HR financial analysis report and debrief. And I want to go over just a moment kind of what a big deal that is. I want you to understand, I asked Insperity, what can you do? I want to offer our attendees something for showing up. What can you do? And I'm thinking they'll send us a white paper, an ebook, and they did that too, and that's fantastic. But what Josh actually over at Insperity said, no, we'll do a financial analysis of their HR budgets. And I said, well, what is that? And then he goes into detail about what it is. It's many hours of an analysis of an HR department's budget compared to what best in-class companies do, and a one-on-one debrief of your opportunities and strengths. So this is kind of a big deal. When I said, are you sure you want to offer that? And he said, yes. I said, all right, sold. Closing that door, you can't take it back now. So before we even get into the rest of the webinar, I did want to let you guys know where you can retrieve that. You'll see on the site there that it's turnkeycoachingsolutions.net/HR report, and that HR report is case sensitive. So moving right along, Jill, I want to share with folks a little bit about your background. And first of all, it's very impressive, and I'm really appreciative that you are taking time away from your Hawaiian paradise home to join us. Ms. Chapman has been quoted as a business expert in media outlets such as the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, CBS Market Watch. She's worked with clients from Marriott and Fox Sports to Monster.com and HR.com. She is a senior performance consultant with Insperity Traditional Employment Solutions. She holds a bachelor's degree in journalism from the University of Texas, a master's degree in, my children are this. No. She holds a master's degree. Let's see, where was your master's degree?
Tarleton.
Right?
Yeah, Tarleton.
Tarleton. And she has SBHR, SHRM, SCP certifications. And if I keep going on, we will never get to our managing your newly remote workforce. So Jill, take it away. What did I miss? What are we going to learn today?
Well, you didn't miss a thing. Thank you very much for that generous introduction. But what we wanted to talk about today are probably the keystones of successfully managing a remote workforce. You know, there's a lot of us that are working from home for the very, very first time. But this whole idea of working from home, that's about as old as the internet is, right? So we have a lot of experience under our belts to be able to say, this is a best practice. Here's some of the potential pitfalls, especially for those of you who are new to this game. And the whole management piece is very, very different, right? It's one thing to manage a group of people who are right outside your door or right down the hall. But when you can't see them all the time, it creates opportunity and maybe a little bit of stress if if you don't have that handle on how do I know they're working? What's going on with my people? What are they doing? Are they on the on the Facebook copying memes over? What are they doing? So to be able to have an opportunity to understand, here's some things that you can put in place early on to make sure that this is successful. We have no idea how long this is going to last, right? And we also have an opportunity later on in the month of April. We're going to come back and talk about, hey, now that they're home, what if they don't want to come back? What are we going to do moving forward, and how are we going to handle our workforce with this new wrinkle that a lot of people hadn't experienced until we were forced to. But today we're going to talk about some of the communication portals that you need to put in place, some of the communication ideas that you can put into place. We'll talk a little bit about composition of what your team looks like now and structure for this moving forward in a remote environment. And then we can't leave the topic without talking about a little bit about the motivation of the people and that compassionate heart that we need to have as managers right now. If time allows, we'll talk about some specific recommendations for those of you who are less familiar with working from home, or if you have people who are less familiar with working from home, some kind of tips and tricks and tools that they can use to be a little bit more successful. We would love for this to be an interactive conversation. I myself have been working remote for a while now, so a lot of this seems pretty obvious to me because I've been doing it for a while. However, I want to be mindful of those of you who this is your first foray into this, and you've had about a week of it, if you've even had that long. Because I know there are some states that are just now starting to institute the work from home programs and that sort of thing. But I want to make sure that we cover your concerns and we cover your questions. So please feel free. Anissa is really going to be watching that chat log to make sure that we cover everything that's vital and important to you, so you find value in our time together today. Before we get started, I know some of the struggles that people have with working from home, and I think that there are maybe some that you imagine that you or your people will have working from home. I will tell you that Buffer actually did a survey like this, but if we can take just a couple of minutes, and if you will give your ideas on what do you think are the biggest struggles for those working from home. Hey, Anissa, can they answer, pick a couple, or do they need to just pick one?
It is a multiple choice.
Okay.
So if there are multiple challenges, you're going to have an opportunity to select more than one.
Right.
So, and folks are selecting a variety. And
Great.
One of the things that you said earlier, Jill, that I'm eager to hear your take on is that the piece around management and managers who are used to working with a remote workforce understand that a leadership style that works for in-person employees doesn't work. It just doesn't. And amazingly enough, a lot of folks believe that it does. They just keep barreling through. It always worked before, so it's bound to, if I just push it hard enough. And so I'm eager to hear your experience with that and your take and recommendations on what managers must know to manage a remote workforce, because it's not the same.
Well, yeah, exactly. And now more than ever, I think job number one, if you do nothing else, job number one is to understand who your people are, because you have introverts and you have extroverts, right? And when we're talking about introverts, they're probably happy about this. They're loving the space. They're loving the fact that they don't have to talk to people if they don't want to. Those of us who are extroverts, I'm already miserable to a certain extent, because even though I can work from home, I don't always work from home. I choose to go into the office because sometimes I just need that touch, right? I just need that connection with other human beings.
Yeah.
And so if nothing else, get to know your people and say, who's the introvert and how do I deal with them? And so it's going
That's
to
important.
cause you to have to work a little harder as a manager, right?
Yeah.
To know who your people are and then to adjust your style to make sure that you're accommodating them. And sometimes you may not know, you may think you know the person, but just ask. They'll tell you. If you ask them how they're feeling, you'll find out whether they fall in one camp or the other, because maybe they're saying they feel isolated or they feel disconnected. Okay, that's an extrovert. They're having issues. Or maybe they're all buoyant and excited, and that's probably your introvert who's saying, I'm loving this, and, stop.
Leave me alone. Exactly. So we do have our poll results.
Interesting.
Well.
Yeah. So I'll tell you what, when Buffer did their survey and to see if we kind of align with that, for that Buffer survey, the number one problem that they have, and we got a lot of votes for it, was the unplugging after work. Like, when does work stop? Am I working 24 hours a day now? Am I working until 10 o'clock at night? So that building in that distinction and helping your staff to build in that distinction about when they're working and when they're not.
Yeah.
I think also I saw on there that the distractions. And that's kind of an unexpected challenge, right? The distractions that we have.
Yes, cat videos are an unexpected challenge.
Right. Well, I am saying our meme game from the U.S. is strong right now, right? And I am loving all the memes that are going around, and I can spend an inordinate amount of time looking those up and laughing at all the memes that are going around right now. But that whole idea of distractions, I think, is something that maybe we didn't plan for, we didn't expect, and who knew that you had to dust above your door lintels? Like I never thought about that before, but now it's driving me crazy, right? Because I'm staring at it. So kind of interesting. That loneliness, that probably appeals to just some folks, that they feel that way. Being able to stay motivated, I think, is another issue that comes up as, maybe this bit of procrastination starts to set in and people say, well, I could do that tomorrow. I can do that tomorrow. But staying motivated and staying engaged with the group, with your manager, and with the work at hand. I thought that this was really interesting. Last night, I read an article in Fast Company magazine that they put out, and they cited a survey of 2,000 workers and 2,000 managers in the US and the UK. And I have to kind of look at my notes here because I just read it last night and haven't committed everything to memory. But they were talking about the disconnect in a work from home program and how workers and their managers feel a bit of a disconnect. What their survey showed was 90% of workers feel connected to their coworkers, but less than 15% of the employees feel connected to their headquarters, and even worse, just 3% felt any connection at all to the C-suite. So, I think there's some lessons to be learned there, because this disconnect could affect the bottom line, because less than half, and this was before the coronavirus, this survey, so this is just regular people working from home, right? But less than half said that they share their ideas with their leaders, and more than half say that they feel voiceless when they're in a work from home program. And so one of the things that we have to be careful of is that we don't stifle ideas, we don't stifle innovation in this time. So I just kind of wanted to share those numbers because that's food for thought. We don't have any idea how long we're going to be in this situation. We don't know when we're all going to get called back into the office, or if we're going to get called back in the office in the same way. So I just want to make sure that you understand that you could potentially be at risk, and we want to try to do everything that we can to mitigate the risks when you're unclear about how to manage and then how to retain these remote workers, and especially if we extend this longer than we anticipated. So that's kind of food for thought, something for us to think about as we tackle this topic, and as you're just thinking about what life's going to look like for the next few weeks or months ahead. But at the heart of it all, it's about communication. If we have those extroverts, if we have those introverts, it's important that we communicate. And really, when they work from home, it's an over communication, right? You're going to have to do more than you ever thought about. I do a lot of talking about generational diversity. And when you get into talking about the different generations, a lot of times it's the us versus them, right? And it's the boomer generation and everybody else who came after them. maybe a little bit of the Xers are taking on some of the boomer characteristics in that feedback idea, because our younger cohorts within our offices expect a lot of feedback. Now, they don't necessarily expect the kind of feedback where you set them down and we're going through a form and it's all formal and it's all stuffy. I mean, it's kind of a give and take of conversation, right? Just check in with me, let me know, am I on the right track? Am I doing this sort of thing? But it's very, very different for those of us that came from a different generation. We used to get an assignment from our boss, and then we would just turn it in when it was due and not ask a lot of questions necessarily about it. We might go ask questions of our coworkers, but we probably didn't go back into our boss going, is this how you wanted this to look? Is this what you wanted? But we figured it out on our own. But then we're finding with our younger cohorts, they're saying, what size font, what color ink do you want me to use, and all these sorts of things. And let's check in with these little milestones before the projects actually due. And so when I talk about that, I get this one group who will roll their eyes, cross their arms, roll their eyes, look at me and go, I'm not going to do that. And I'm like, well, it's just the ebb and flow of conversation. It's not the stuffy part. But here's a rule of thumb for feedback. If you're one of those that's not used to it, you take what you would expect and you double it, and you double it again, and you're probably
Jill, are you still with me? Maybe having some, I don't know if you can hear me. Hi guys, if you're on the call, let me know if your webinar is still going. It looks like we may have frozen. I am getting a text message from my team that you can hear me, but can't hear Jill. Well, weren't we just talking, the poll said that we weren't worried about reliable Wi-Fi. Let's see.
Is that on my end? So sorry, guys. This is one of the challenges, right?
It is one of the challenges
of working remote, but
you're back on. So everyone says she's back. So
yeah, I'm back. Woo! Can you see my screen though? Did I lose that part of it?
You just froze again, but I can still hear you, and I'm not able to see your screen. So let's give it a minute. Keep going without your screen, and it's back up.
It's all working. It's all working. I don't know. Technology is certainly a challenge, but that's important to
demonstrate
those challenges, right? With your daily team communication. Some of the best practices that I know of involve doing stand-up meetings. I don't know if you've already instituted those, but having just virtual stand-up meetings, first 15 minutes of the day, or at a time, if you've got people in various time zones or with various issues, picking a time in the early morning to get started. But having that stand up, what are we doing today? What did we do yesterday? Those sorts of things, and kind of set everybody on a path for the day can be very, very valuable. And I think it helps when we're talking about some of the other issues too around trust and accountability, but that daily communication and building in the framework for that. And as a manager, there's something that I always, a manager's job is not necessarily tactical, right? We're really there to remove the obstacles for our employees. That's our job, is to make sure that those people who are assigned to do the tactical work can get it done. And so in that daily team communication, you can see what kind of obstacles are there, and you can work through those very, very quickly and efficiently as you start each day, because that's really our job, right? Is to make sure that they can do what they need to do and they have everything to do it with. The whole idea of video conferencing as a tool, using something like what we're using here with Zoom, there's a million tools out there that will allow you to do video conferencing. And why this is so important, why you need to tell people to use their cameras, during the conference is, it's only about 7% of our communication is what you hear, right? Like the actual words that you say.
Yeah.
Now your voice and your tone, that adds another layer, like 30-something%. Don't quote me on my math here, but I know it's 7% for the just the words that you say. It's 30-something% for your voice, the tone of your voice, the just how you're saying those words, and then the rest of it, like 55% or something like that. So you guys do the math. Is your body language, what your face looks like, how you're sitting, and all that sort of thing. So if you take that away, your communication becomes very imprecise, right? We don't really know, sort of like that whole email thing. Remember when the email came out and we were like, they're yelling at me because they're typing in all caps and all that. And that wasn't maybe the intent of the sender. They just didn't know they had their caps lock on. But because of that imprecision, that video conferencing adds another layer. Not only that, but it just builds this connection.
What would you say, Jill, to folks who are somewhat resistant to putting in some of these best practices around regular communication, increased communication? I know for me, I have had a virtual team for 22 years now. I work with employees all over the globe. We've got employees in India and Philippines and Hungary and Romania and Canada. And then I've got our US-based team. And if it weren't for instant message on our Hangouts and Skype, video conferencing, email, and the telephone, we would never, ever get anything done. And it's difficult to explain that to someone who hasn't had to manage a remote team, because it feels like, oh gosh, we're never going to get anything done if I'm constantly in a meeting. And it's not accurate. But how do they get over that resistance and frame it so that their team understands more communication, not less, is imperative?
Right. And I think the easy answer is to build that business case. We just talked about some of the stats of how people feel disconnected, and then innovation starts to die. Ideas don't get shared with one another. So if nothing else, it's to build that business case to say you want to be successful in the future, and you can't stifle that. So you have to open it up and make it more robust. I think when we get home, we don't realize how many times during the day when we were all at the office that somebody had slide by our office or we'd chat in the lunchroom and things like that. We don't recognize how valuable that time was and how much of our time was spent in those kind of those conversations like that. Another best practice for it kind of mimics this video conferencing, but I've heard of a lot of companies that will open up a conference line all day. And just leave it open. And so people can come and go and ask those questions just like they would if they were walking down the hall, or if they were just, turning in their cube to their cube neighbor or something like that, just throwing out a question and somebody just answers it in the moment. So again, I don't think that feels like, oh, we have to schedule a time to get together. We have to do all this stuff very formally. But if you had something like that, a channel open that people could, just ebb and flow. I think that could be very, very successful. And I think you wouldn't see it as an intrusion into your calendar or something like that, but that it's just like working at the office, but that being available. And at the end of the day, especially when I'm talking to the managers, that's your job. That's what we're here for. We're here to make sure that our workers have what they need and can get their jobs done. So it's imperative. I mean, I think the answer is, what's the alternative? If you don't figure it out, who's going to be working next month, right? But and then for those who just aren't used to it, you got to kind of grow into it. It's not going to all happen like that, but to have all the tools available to set in certain expectations about these things. And some things is just going to be, when we went remote in my own group, when we went remote, the caveat was, you will always have your video on. That's just part and parcel of the opportunity to work from home. And sometimes we'll go, you know what, guys, I'm not feeling it. I'm going to turn this off. But that's an exception, not the rule. But the expectation when we log on is that we're going to log on and the video is going to be part of it.
Excellent.
And so, I talked a little bit about the team communication, but again, that individual communication. Even when we were live and in person with each other, a lot of times I would talk to certain managers and find that if ever they slid something in their calendar, and this would just break my heart, but anytime if they would slide something in their calendar, a lot of times it was their one-on-one meetings with their employees, right? Like, I've got this pressing business need. I just need to cancel all my one-on-ones. That's what you need to do more than anything, probably. So that individual communication, that opportunity for the one-on-one communication, super important to successfully managing your remote workers. And what that could look like is, a Zoom meeting that is just the two, making sure that you're responsive to any IMs that come in, picking up the phone and actually just having a phone conversation from time to time. But that checking in with your team and understanding what's going on with them as individuals is super important, especially now, not only because we're working from home, but because we're working at home in a crisis, right?
Yep.
Have you had any experiences with that, anything around communication? I know you guys have been doing it for a very long time and you're used to all that, but is there anything that you've seen with communication that has changed since the,
I think that yes, and yes. And I think for the purposes of us talking about managing new to remote, one thing that I have discovered is there's been a lot of research about the number of one-on-one meetings that are actually essential between a manager and a direct report for those direct reports to feel like they are engaged with the mission and the vision of the organization and that they're a part of something bigger and greater, and to feel loyal. And the research shows that the best companies schedule one-on-one meetings every single week with their direct reports. And when working with companies, we were often told, oh, there's no way I could do that, that my people
would all the time,
would run for the hills. And I say, no problem. I'm just sharing the best practices. I'm talking about the companies that outlast everyone else. So you don't want to be one of those. No, I'm just teasing.
Right. But that's the truth, right? But yet again, like you just said, those are the meetings that I see slip off of the calendar first.
With remote.
Yeah.
If in fact managers are doing that, once folks go remote, it's one of the first things that goes.
Right.
And in fact, we're only talking about a 5-minute check-in at times.
Right. It's not this big, hairy, I've got to have 1 million forms and complete all this documentation because I had this meeting. It's the check-in, with somebody. And so for that reason, I think that kind of nicely segues into this idea of building in structure and process.
Yeah.
Because without that structure, without laying out those expectations, I think your efficiency for sure is gonna suffer. Particularly for these people who are moving into a remote workforce now and have never experienced it before. I think what you're trying to do as a manager is to align the assignments with the right person for what I'm going to call the easy wins, so people can kind of transition into this. Making sure that you're not giving them tasks that are too difficult to complete or too complex right off the bat. Give them some easy wins. And then in those daily check-ins, you can celebrate those wins, right? So that's beginning to build that trust and kind of ease the fears of what it feels like, to work remote. And that showing trust in somebody, giving them the task and the tools to get it done, is so important. It's important if we're face to face. It's important if we're remote, but probably more important when we're remote because nobody can see each other, right? We don't know what the other one's doing. We don't know what's going on. But to show that you're trusting them to be able to manage their time and to do the things that they need to do and get them done at the when they need to be done. Which kind of I'll jump, but that leads to what we really need to focus on is not the amount of activity, but the outcomes. Like build in what those deliverables look like, and then let them work to those outcomes. Years ago, Best Buy tried this remote only workforce, ROW, and because they were having this huge amount of turnover, right? Voluntary turnover. And they were finding that a lot of the people who were leaving for remote opportunities, or, they just didn't like this idea that I had to come into the office from, 8 to 5 every day. And so they said, you know what, who really cares about when it gets done, as long as it gets done by the deadline? And so they created this work at 2 in the morning, work at 2 in the afternoon, wear your slippers, come to the office. We don't care where you do it or how you do it, just get it done. And the focus is on the outcome, because, even when we were in the office, I could look pretty busy for 8 hours a day. You could hear me clicking away at the keys. You have no idea what I was really doing, right? I could have been, chatting with all my friends on, a social media platform or something like that, but I can look busy for 8 hours. But it's when you're really just worried about what the deliverables are, what the outcomes are, and make that the focus. And everybody knows how to budget their time. And especially right now, because we have, workers who have kids at home. They have spouses that are trying to work from home. We don't know what's at their house. They got pets. They got things going on. And maybe it's not realistic that they work an 8 to 5 shift, right? It might be that they work from 8 until 10. Then they have to work with their kids a little bit because their kids have projects that are due, and they need a little bit of attention. Maybe there's a Wi-Fi issue, right? And they have to share it with too many people in the household. And so there needs to be some flexibility there. But again, if you say, here's the outcome that I need by tomorrow at 10 or whatever your deadline is, rather than I need you, I need you to work on this for 2 hours today. Who cares? Like when, where, how? Just make sure that it gets done. And I think that goes a long way to build that culture of trust. And then the accountability. Remember how I was talking about those stand-up meetings? I think if you have those stand-up meetings, that builds in its own accountability, right? Because if I said I was going to do something yesterday, in the stand-up meeting, I probably need to report on what it was that I did. If you've never read a book called 4 Disciplines of Execution, 4DX, it was written by Mark McChesney, Sean Covey, Dr. Stephen Covey's son, and Jim Hewling. And it's been out for a while now, but they found as management consultants that a lot of times people were great at building strategies, they were great at building goals, but when the everyday kind of set in, they'd see those goals kind of get pushed to the wayside, and people weren't necessarily being held accountable to those things. So when with these stand-up meetings, which is something that they espouse in the 4DX, is an opportunity to keep people on track and hold them accountable. And I think that could be a valuable tool, whether you're working remote or working in the office. We adopted that in my group, and with a ton of success. Because you're not going to come to a meeting 2 days in a row going, yeah, all that stuff I told you I was going to do, I didn't get it done. So it invests in the accountability for your group.
So I want to talk a little bit
yeah.
about the structure that you're mentioning. So the structure also includes the use of these tools, whether it's the Zoom or Microsoft Teams. As a small company, we use a lot of the free tools, Skype, Hangout. We also use a lot of screen capture and screen sharing tools. I know that there's free ones out there like Jing, but we use a program called Snagit by TechSmith. I also know that we have ongoing chats. We use Basecamp, but we have also used Slack before.
Right.
And those things still can get out of control pretty quick. If the habit is using those resources all day long for anything, all of a sudden people that want to get something done are going to check out of them. Right. So how do you recommend, even though we're saying communicate, there's also parameters around the forums and around when, and the appropriateness of turning off your chat when you're actually trying to get some work done.
Right. So do not disturb can be your friend, right? And if you're responsible and you know what your deliverables are, you know what your expectations are, you know how you have to manage your time. And remember when we were talking at the very first, like what are some of the things that people struggle with, and it's this idea of distraction. And it's not necessarily having to dust over the door lintel. It's also all these IMs that keep coming in, right? Yes. And so, you have to build some structure in to protect your time. Another company that I know one of their practices is with their remote team is that they all click on and check in and say, I'm online. And then they all say, I'm offline. So they build some parameters around what's their actual work day, right? And so I'm not getting pinged at 8 o'clock at night with something necessarily, that I have my on and my off hours. And then building in your own structure. A lot of us have been organized by our Outlook calendars and things like that. And when we were working in the office, we might have built in that little busy time or, like administrative time or something like that. It's the same process when you're working from home. Just manage your calendar, know what your expectations are, and have a conversation with your team as to what your expectations for your own calendar are, and understand what theirs are for theirs. So again, it goes back to that communication piece too, right? But building in that structure around when I'm off, when I'm on, when I'm going to allow people to interrupt my work, or when I really need that focused time. And I put on all my do not disturbs. Right.
Very good. Thank you.
And so, we just had these beautiful segues, and we didn't even practice this, but it kind of leads into that idea of compassion. You know, when you're setting that structure and when you're setting those expectations for your people, is really understanding where they're at right now, and what their human needs are. It's a weird time for people. You know, it seems to be almost polarizing that you have this one camp that thinks this isn't that big of a deal. I don't understand why I'm being inconvenienced like this. Or why my stock prices, you know, my 401k has no money in it anymore, to this group that's really, truly, fearfully afraid of what's going on. And so it's important for you to understand where your people are, what their needs might be, what else they're responsible for besides just themselves, right? Kids, family, friends. You know, but being able to look after that. So it really calls you as a manager to check in with your own EIQ, right? Your own emotional intelligence quotient, to understand and to be, it's not to relax all the rules and to lower your expectations of your people. It's just to change them in a way in which works for everybody. And this may force you to have a little bit of small talk that maybe you didn't invest in, you know, when you had the luxury of being in the office, that you've got to do some of those things to build rapport with your people. It's about knowing your people. We talk about that a lot when we're talking about goal setting, and we talk about rewards and recognition with your people. If you don't know your people, you don't know how to reward them, right? You don't know what motivates them to accomplish their goals and that sort of thing. So this would be a great time to really learn a little bit more about your people. And it's not a time to throw the development plans out the window. Development of your people is still important. We're going to go back to working like we used to, sort of, kind of, maybe. And so we don't need to derail all of that because we've had this bump. So being mindful of what their development plans are, what their goals are, what their expectations for their future with your organization looks like, and making sure that you're still speaking to that in your communications. And again, just, you know, considering each individual's situation and knowing how to work through all that, I guess.
You know,
If you
one of the things that this brings up for me is, if we go back to communication, structure, compassion, is a formula that is appropriate for this situation. And it's a simple managerial formula that looks like, what's working for you, what's not working for you, what can I do to help? That is a 5-minute conversation. It's a phone or video conversation. But initially, I find that when managers begin implementing this, initially, if they've never asked their people what's working for you, what's not working for you, and what can I do to help, people are going to be like, I'm fine. What's wrong with him, right? Or her? And but I tell our managers, keep doing it. Eventually they'll be like, you know, there is something I want to talk to you about. And they'll begin to feel that they can trust you, that you're genuine in what you're asking. Now, the truth is, at some point, if the group keeps telling me the same thing over and over again, I'm too distracted, our technology isn't good enough, I feel disconnected, the manager is going to have to do something with it. In order to maintain that trust. But that's the kind of structure that will generate this that you're suggesting here. Employees continuing to feel connected, and managers keeping their finger on the pulse of their performance, and their employees' happiness.
Right. Because, you know, as we move forward, it's about still innovating. It's about still coming up with the ideas that are going to move our company forward, whether we're all sitting in the same room or we're scattered across the world. And so we've got to build these things in so that we can still get that from our people, right? That we can still get the best out of our folks. And they know that we have their best interest. That's one thing that I've been so proud of when I've seen a lot of our clients and my own organization as we move through this, is that real feeling of employee first that I've felt, and that I hope some of our clients have felt as well, that we understand that this is a weird time, and and so making sure that we're really speaking to the needs of the employees, and that they understand and they feel that concern for them. I think is so critical in this particular time. I really don't know why I said all that, but that's what I meant. I think too, there's probably an opportunity to spend a little time talking about some of the recommendations that, some tips and tricks that we can specifically talk to in the last few minutes of our conversation. I keep seeing the little chat thing turn orange. So do we have a lot of questions or do we
my team and I are kind of engaging, asking questions, but not any particular question has come up. But this is a perfect time to invite folks. What are you struggling with? What have we not covered that you would like for us to? What are your people? What are you hearing with your people who are working remote? And don't hesitate to ask us, throw us the hard balls.
Right. That's what I want. I like the conversation. I like when it kind of goes back and forth. I think that really one of the things that's most important as we move through this is that business continuity, right? That we don't lose the momentum that we had when we were all working together. I mean, it's clear that things have to change, but not everything has to change. And so just making sure that that those things are vital to the success of our organization, figure out how we can do it on a remote platform and keep those things going. I know Anissa already talked a lot about the apps and the tools that are out there, the free things that are out there. If you're a Microsoft organization, not that I'm espousing any of these, but if you're a Microsoft organization, that Teams thing can be really, really helpful because from that platform, you can go into a lot of your different collaboration tools, a lot of your communication tools and everything can be kind of kept there at at one place. But if you're not clear or not comfortable or familiar with some of these tools, let me just name some for you. Slack, Zoom, which a lot of us are using every day, GoToMeeting, Skype, anything in the Google suite of products, Google Hangouts and those sorts of things, Gmails and that sort of thing. There's also Trello, there's Confluence, there's AHA. And these are just some names of some of the tools and some of the apps that you can use. You can investigate them on your own. But there's plenty out there. And the really kind of cool thing is in this moment, a lot of folks are giving free trials or giving free opportunity to work with these tools for the next month or so, just to make sure that you can try to keep business as usual. And I think this whole idea of keeping teammates engaged, we talk about that sense of isolation or that just distractedness for our employees, but remembering that they're human and doing some fun things, right? Like it doesn't always have to be this, we're coming together for this stand-up meeting. Maybe have a stand-up meeting and say, okay, today is beach day, and have everybody come to the stand-up meeting wearing, beach attire or something like that, and how crazy can they do some of these things? This afternoon, my own team is having what we're calling a Hattie Hour. So it's a happy hour online, but we'll all be virtual, and it's all about what hat are you going to wear, right? So just wearing fun hats, doing things a little bit out of the box, things that we might not have done. Just before I logged on to this email, I got this email. What am I in? I'm in a webinar. But I got an email that from my group, that because I think is today opening day of baseball? I don't know. But whatever day opening day is, maybe it's today. But that we were all supposed to wear, which I didn't do, our favorite baseball team's attire, do some crazy things, eat hot dogs for lunch, share, running the bases and doing all those sorts of things, but get creative about how you can keep your teammates engaged. Let them come up with some of these ideas. Another one that I heard of was like pets on parade kind of thing, because a lot of your folks have pets, so every once in a while just let them share their pet, as part of the meeting. Another one, a company did what they call company cribs. And so we're all working from home, right? So people would take you on a virtual tour of their home. I won't, because I don't want you to see unmade beds and things like that. But taking, just again, kind of coming up with that, a kitty corner, maybe letting your kids, giving them a Zoom channel, letting the kids of your employees talk to each other. Maybe have a show and tell and letting them show you their art projects and that sort of thing that they're working on, or give a book report to your staff if that's important for what they're doing. But there's all sorts of clever and creative ways to get your teams engaged. And it's not all on you as a manager. Let them come up with some of these ideas, and the buy-in will be even more spectacular, right? But doing some of those things to add some levity, add some fun, add another dimension to the opportunity to work from home. Have you heard anything else, Anissa, of like fun ideas that people are doing?
You pretty much summed it up.
Yeah.
I definitely have heard of the happy hour, not
Right.
happy hour. So that was
Right.
new for me.
Right. Or, if that doesn't work with your company culture, you could do a coffee,
Right.
coffee break, and everybody just grab a cup of coffee and spend just a couple of minutes just chatting with one another. Like we might've done if we were in the office and headed to the break room. Virtual dance classes, virtual yoga, dance parties and things like that. Again, trying to encourage your people to get up and move around. I know I just posted a meme that said, if I keep this up, how does it work? Is the 600-pound life people, did they reach out to me? Do I call them? How's this supposed to work after all this is over with, right? So getting people up and moving, giving them an opportunity, challenging them. Maybe you put a challenge together that says, we're going to all walk to Cancun, and that's 12,000 miles or whatever it is, and let's all keep track of our walking, and we're going to try to get to Cancun by Easter or wherever. Something like that might be kind of fun. But keeping teammates engaged. Those unexpected challenges, I think we've kind of beat those up a little bit already. But the things like the distractions, whether they're family distractions, just Bravo television or whatever it might be that could be nagging at you, or a Netflix binge or something like that, but just making sure that there is enough structure in someone's day that they can get their work done when they need to get it done. And if they have to go on Do Not Disturb, that you understand that and that everybody honors that for each of our teammates. And some ideas of like, if you've never done this before, again, clarifying the work hours, I think is critical. Telling people to build out a designated workspace. You don't know how important that is. But the temptation is possibly to roll over in bed and start working off your phone, while you still lay in bed. But getting up and going to work, I think can do a lot to try to set the mindset in the right way. I also heard this little tip. Don't wear stretchy pants. Wear pants that have buttons or zippers, because that way you won't feel like you'll feel a little bit more professional, and you'll be watching your waistline while you do it at the same time. So that whole pants and pajamas optional, not so much. Like wear regular clothes, if you will. So again, and it kind of puts you in the right headspace to do those sorts of things. And again, saying hello and goodbye to everybody on your team, I think is really important, day in and day out. What other ideas do you have, Anissa?
Well, I think you've covered quite a few. One of the things that I'm wondering about is because of the distractions, and as you mentioned, we don't know how long we're going to be doing this.
Mm-hmm.
And the bottom line is people are now having to work from home with their children in tow.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes those are infants, and sometimes those are like mine, crazy teenagers, that I'm having to keep in the house in order to I'm practically going to go back to sitting on them in timeout.
Right.
I think. But my point being is that it's not customary for a manager to understand that these distractions they're not negotiable at this time. You can't do something with your toddler except your toddler is there. So what exactly are HR folks and managers supposed to do with their level of expectations when the work doesn't get done, when the employees have to find a way to be adaptable in order to get the work done, which may mean it's not a 9 to 5 anymore. They may have to take that time when they're attending to their toddlers, and
Hmm.
that's a break time, for example. What
Right.
are you finding that remote organizations do to manage that in this kind of situation?
Right. And you know, I think it's a work in progress, but to your point, I think it is a lot of just clarity around what do I need to have done, right? And then they understand what the pressures are on them to feed people and take care of people and check math homework and whatever else it might be. Um, or with an infant or a toddler, you know, just attending to them, just, you know, that I think those expectations for what that looks like, and conversation, again, it's about communication, right? If we communicate, then we all are on the same page. But if we just leave it to somebody to try to figure out on their own, they don't feel like we're in their corner, that's when the wheels are going to fall off. But I think we need to say too that the expectation for performance is still there. How you get it done, maybe that's the thing that we negotiate on, but the expectation for performance is still there. So if you have somebody who's underperforming, I think that's the honest conversation to say, do you just need to take PTO for a little bit of time? Do we need to do something differently here? But these are still your expectations. Let's figure out how we get it done. And again, in a management seat, that's your job, right? Your job is to figure out how you can help them to make sure that they're successful and that they are getting the work done, removing their the obstacles that you can. And maybe that's a specified, you know, clock watching kind of thing. Maybe you remove that, because I honestly, I don't know how some of these people are doing it. With their kids having, you know, 5 hours of work to do, they've got 8 hours of work to do or more. You know, how do they get it all done? And the best I can figure out is they work a little bit, and they take a little bit of time with the kids. They work a little bit, they take a little bit of time with the kids, and maybe that's the most successful way to handle that. But I think, again, it goes back to that idea of communication and being able to talk about it, get it out on the table, and then you know, two heads are better than one always. So, you know, figuring out the solutions together.
Very good.
Yeah.
Very good.
So
All right,
any
we
other
have about
kinds of,
10 minutes
yeah.
to wrap up here. Yeah, again, if you've been listening and you have a question that we didn't get to, or a particular challenge that your team is experiencing, or you want to know how to take some of the structure or some of the technology or what have you back to your team, don't hesitate to reach out. We're fielding calls on summit@turnkeycoachingsolutions.com, as well as our home office at 281-469-4244. And Jill will be here with me a few more minutes if you have a question. But in the meantime, I wanted to also share with you guys a little bit more. If you joined us at the beginning, I mentioned this, but friends at Insperity have offered an incredibly generous HR financial analysis report and debrief for those of you who are on the call and joined us. And this is, as I mentioned before, is kind of a big deal. The goal is to help you gain insight into the real cost burden of being an employer, be able to identify the costs associated over the life cycle of your employees, be able to compare your HR strategy and budget against what successful organizations do, and learn and align according to strategic HR, which I think is really cool. I mentioned earlier that I had to double check, are you sure you want to give this away? Because there's a lot of man hours that go into this. And they said, absolutely. As you know, I said, okay, great, let's do this. So if this is something that you feel like would be of benefit, it truly is no obligation. You know, it's not about whether or not they're going to get a sale out of it. Of course, we're all in business for a reason. And it really is also about giving back and supporting businesses. So don't hesitate to click on that, or I don't guess you can click on it, but if you go to turnkeycoachingsolutions.net/HRR report, and that is case sensitive, HR and RR uppercase, then you can schedule your time and we'll get that on the calendar for you. And then last but not least, I did want to mention that Turnkey is also offering a buy one, get one free on our specifically designed leading in a crisis training. And it's the virtual training around managing a newly remote workforce. It's about maximizing performance during unexpected complexity, business continuity, serving and working with clients differently, the key competencies around adaptability and self-control and relationship management. We also have a really extraordinary class on neuro leadership and employee motivation, as well as crisis management and crisis communication plans, etc. And for the duration of our quarantine, we'll be offering a buy one, get one virtual training. So last minute thoughts, Jill, what would you say is the best practice for HR professionals to help their teams immediately understand the differences and how they need to adapt to effectively manage their remote workforce?
The very best. I think that what we have to, I'm trying to think of what I think is the very best thing right now. I still think that if I'm talking to leaders, the very most important job number one to do right now is to understand your workforce, right? To understand them and to be able to say, I know what they need versus what they need, and that I have to take on the onus of adjusting my style to be able to make them successful. Because quite frankly, if your team's not successful, you're not successful either, right? So, so understanding their role in making sure that their team finds success in this time. And it may mean that we have to work a little harder, work a little differently, but we got to do what we got to do in this moment. Right?
Adaptability,
Right,
is the theme of the day.
Right. And so I think that's my most valuable takeaway.
I love it. Thank you, Jill. I really appreciate you sharing your expertise and your time with us. Thank you for joining us today. Do watch your email for our other virtual sessions over the entire month of April. It's going to be every Wednesday and Thursday. We're going to bring more topics around managing this crisis and supporting your business and your employees. So we appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Mahalo.
Mahalo.